Yes, thanks. Hello, Eric. Good to see that you agreed to this talk. Most interesting. Quick thing on the yields. So you mentioned the potential increase of yields. So I'm sorry if I put that in the chat. I think we're looking possibly up to 18 metric tons of palm products per hectare. I think that's maybe what you meant.
Yes,
just
yes,
bunches.
yes, sorry. Yeah.
Which means that actually almost the sky is the limit for palm. We can look at that. There is indeed a massive potential for increase. I'd like to look at another one. What your scenario ones, your scenarios 1 and 2. To me, there's just one thing maybe that might create confusion, or at least that's a different factor, is that palm is vegetable oil very well, and that's the main product. But soybean, we have an issue there because it's what you mentioned as well. If people eat more meat, we have a problem. Well, soybean is a source of protein for meat production. I think that is where we have an issue. The production, the increase of production, or the additional need for soybean is not only oil. So we can't just compare soybean and palm because of their oil usage. I think soybean has a much more important usage in terms of or market in terms of protein for for meat production. And I'm worried that with more affluence, we see more meat, and then there's actually more competition for palm from the soybean oil, which is not produced for the oil, but for the proteins. Sorry, I hope it was not too convoluted. And how can we also factor that in the need for soybean and the impact, if you want, of soybean? Thanks.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Olivier. Agam.
Yeah. Thank you, Pak Tukar, Pak Eric. A few days ago, I read an article in Reuters about you, Pak Eric. The article is comparing between coconut and palm oil productivity related to biodiversity. However, this is not that I wanted to ask you. So this is related to how the international stakeholders see palm oil. We can see that some of them opting for boycotting or exit. Some of them are choosing for voice like Greenpeace or engage. However, if we look at Greenpeace, actually, they have been mentioning in their articles in report that boycotting palm oil is not the answer. European Palm Oil Conference a few years ago also mentioned this is the business group in Europe that boycotting palm oil is not also is not the answer. So what's it called? NGO also mentioned about boycotting is not the answer. The business also mentioned that boycott is not the answer. How we can shift or persuade those voice or exit to be more engaged? If I look at how Pak Eric position, actually you are more in more engagement side, Pak. In the Reuters article, you were mentioned that you work with ANC, RSPO, and others. What was it called? Mentioning about the negative and also the positive side. So how do we try to persuade the international stakeholder to be more engaged? The second one is about the, if I'm not mistaken, you are active in Pongo Alliance or Heart of Borneo, Pak? I forget your NGO. Heart of Borneo, yeah. Yes. If we look at the map of Kalimantan, actually the intact forest is located in the Heart of Borneo, yeah. The elsewhere in the Malaysian side and also the Indonesian side actually is most of them are secondary forest, yeah, fragmented. What do you think about the current HCS approach methodology? Because it is more on the forest stratification, whether big chunk of forested area or smaller chunk of forested area. If we look at the meaningful, you mentioned about the project in Sungai Putri, Gunung Palung, how to connect the corridor. Actually, there are some smaller chunk of forested patches that can be act as a corridor between Sungai Putri and Gunung Palung. That's what's got a good example. However, if we apply strict HES approach methodology, actually there are many smaller patches that is not meaningful. So, what do you think about the methodology? Thank you, Pak.
Thank you. Thank you for Wahida, Olivia, and Agam. Yeah, the last screen actually is coming from Gati research that's being published recently. Bart has been asking me to invite Gati to speak on this discussion, but I don't think he will accept that challenge to speak on this discussion. Okay, Eric, go ahead, please answer.
Okay, I'll start with your question, Ibu Wahida. I don't think we've met. I'm based in Europe, so maybe one day when I'll head towards Brussels, I'll come and knock on your door. I think it's a real tricky issue. One of the big problems, I think, is what is sustainability. Everyone seems to know the word, to use the word. We haven't got a clue what it means, and basically everyone can make their own interpretation of what you or I think is sustainable. Some people, it's value driven. For some people, nothing is more important than the survival of an orangutan. Whether that survival of an orangutan impacts the life of a poor farmer in Kalimantan, who can either not or yes send his children to school, is irrelevant. It's a value driven interpretation of sustainability, and people have the right to have their opinions on these things, but it doesn't make it any easier to come to a meaningful discussion about sustainability. So if Gati says it is not sustainable because the forest was cut down 40 years ago, I can also say, as I said earlier, like what makes any agriculture sustainable then? Because all agriculture in the world is done on areas that were at some stage natural environments. Who is anyone to say if it's 40 years ago it's not sustainable, if it's 50 years ago it is sustainable, or if it's 2,000 years ago it's sustainable? It's all a bit meaningless. Ultimately, to me, it's a big discussion that also the EU needs to have. The EU has massive ecological problems in its agriculture. We're not talking about deforestation there, we're talking about disappearance of insect populations, really significant fundamental undermining of functional ecosystems. There's a real concern in Europe about losing natural values. Rewilding, to me, is as much part of the sustainability discussion as preventing further losses of natural environments. I'm from a conservation background. I care deeply about maintaining wildlife. I've worked on the species like orangutan for 30 years, and I've only see a decline. So I'm really concerned about what's happening. But to me, these discussions need to be broader and need to be done on a global basis. And this is what concerns me as a scientist, that there are discussions ongoing with the EU that to me are just insufficiently informed by good science. How can the EU have discussions about the impacts of soy or peanuts if we don't even have a map of the peanut of the world? We don't have a clue what deforestation has been caused by these crops. So to me, it's a really important gap in scientific knowledge that needs to be addressed really quickly to have a more informed discussions about meeting future demand for these oils, so we don't end up in a stupid situation where indeed we say no to palm oil and it turns out that therefore we said yes to soy and we have a massive expansion of that product. So not an easy one, and as a scientist, of course, we always say we don't know enough, we need to know more. Please give us money and we'll do the research. But in this case, I think that is really quite important. Or at least try to do an analysis of what we know. We've done this for oil palm. I think there's a need to do this for the other oil crops to inform these discussions between, for example, the governments of Indonesia and the EU. And I think that that links to what you were saying, Olivier. Of course, this is the problem we had. We published this paper a month or two ago about coconut. Coconut actually being quite problematic. No one looks at coconut. Coconut is the wonderful palm that grows on tropical beaches. It's beautiful. You go on holiday to these countries. How could it possibly be bad? And I've always said, I wrote in the Jakarta Post or Globe, I can't remember, years ago. So I would be really annoyed if I was an oil palm. If I was an oil palm tree, so well, what's wrong with me? I mean, why do people hate me and they love my cousin, which is also just a palm? So it's always kind of annoyed me, this total, completely different view people have on two different palm species and the impacts they have. So we looked at coconut, and coconut has a significant impact on biodiversity, according to the ICN experts. I think it becomes important. This relates to your comment, Olivier. If I'm a consumer and I'm standing in a supermarket, and the supermarkets in Europe are crazy. I mean, you have like 4 meters of oils in front of you, from virgin pressed sesame oil to you name it, absolute. And you need to make a choice. And if I'm a concerned consumer who cares about biodiversity impacts, I need to know how many species are threatened by that one bottle of oil that I grab. So whether, and this was the argument people said, if you look at coconut, coconut is not just produced for oil. Coconut is used for copra and other products and so on. To me, that's not relevant. To produce that one bottle of oil requires a certain amount of land. And according to the experts, that certain amount of land is associated with the threat to certain species. That is relevant to consumers. Of course, soy is also used for other products, but it doesn't undermine that if you use soy oil, it requires a certain amount of land to produce that oil. Anyway, these are debates that we simplify, but we just call out that we need to start thinking about the nuances there, and I have a more informed discussion. So I think that relates to both the question of Ibu Wahida and Olivier. Agam, let me see. Yeah, you referred to that coconut and palm oil paper. It was really strange because I'm transparent. So we wrote a paper in this journal, Current Biology, and journals these days always ask you, do you have a conflict of interest? And I said, well, I've worked with Austindo for many years. I've recently done some work for the RSPO, so I declare that, and almost like that, the media made me a stooge of the palm oil industry. Clearly, this guy is being paid to attack coconut. I didn't even get paid to do the study. No one paid me to do this. This is an objective study looking at not just coconut and palm oil and juxtaposing them, but looking at all the vegetable oils and see what the associated biodiversity threats are. But people just like to put you into boxes. So where I'm trying to bring nuance to discussion, people are trying really hard to put me back in a box. You're a friend of palm oil, therefore you must be an enemy of the coconut. Something weird, which is a shame because it's so counterproductive. It doesn't get us anywhere closer to solutions. I engage, and I've been doing this for many years. Why? Because I think that palm oil, as I said, is there. If I hear people say, ban palm oil, let's get rid of palm oil, I'm just trying to imagine what that's going to look like in Kalimantan. Are these oil palms going to disappear and grow back into natural forests tomorrow? My key thing, and I've worked in Kalimantan since 1992, one thing I know is any areas that are not managed are generally badly treated, whether it's agricultural land, it's forest land. If it's not managed and it's accessible, it's going to lose its value. So I'm always looking at management. My ideal solution would be for the whole of Kalimantan to be one large protected area. I know the Indonesian government is not going to support that. So there's going to be other users of that land. And I'm always looking at timber concessions to work with. I'm looking at oil palm concessions to work with. I'm looking at communities to work with in terms of perhutanan social forestry. Anyone who can help, has a legal mandate to manage a piece of forest and has an objective to manage that area is always better than the unmanaged situation. So people that naively call for, let's just get rid of palm oil, basically saying, let's just stop managing anything. And I know that the end result will not be good for biodiversity. So it's easy to have a strong opinion about something. It's a lot harder to have an informed opinion about something that can be translated into a meaningful on-the-ground solution. So yes, I am very much about engagement. I don't always like palm oil. Palm oil has destroyed a lot of areas that I've worked in, and I've seen orangutan populations disappear. I'm no friend of palm oil as such, but I do see companies that are trying to improve management, and I have seen positive impacts of companies working on biodiversity management in their estate. So it is really the question, what is the alternative, and what could we realistically do to improve biodiversity conservation? So in that respect, to your last question, Pak Agam, these tiny forest patches, the more we look at orangutans, the more we learn that ecologically they're really quite resilient. They're surviving. We make them out to be as a species that only survives in tropical rainforests, primary tropical rainforests. Orangutans are really quite smart in using resources. Ideally, they have forest environments, but they survive in multifunctional landscapes as long as they're not being killed. And the killing problem is killed or translocated or taken out of the population. Orangutans breed extremely slowly, produce very, very few descendants. So it's a small removal from an orangutan population. One adult female that's taken out of a population of 100 is going to crash that population, whatever you do. So to me, habitat, of course, is really important, but to me, the prevention of removal of orangutans or killing or conflict killing is really the key. And we're learning, so in Sabah, around the Kinabatangan area, it's mostly Malayo people. There's been traditionally extremely little hunting of orangutans, and orangutans survive in areas that have probably 80% oil palm with lots of forest patches. And there's forest patches there of 5 hectares and 6 hectares and 10 hectares that have been occupied by female orangutans breeding for over 20 or 30 years. So it's not ideal orangutan habitat, but those are landscapes in which orangutans can survive. And I think we need to start engaging that idea and working with the government, because the standard thing is now to take orangutans out of these landscapes and move them somewhere else with unknown impacts because they're not monitored. Probably mortality rates are very high, and we know they can survive there. I know sometimes this is really difficult when indeed there are conflicts with poor farmers and so on, but I think we need to work towards a situation where we're managing all remaining forests, but even if it's half a hectare, has value to people, has ecological value, has value to birds that use these as stepping stones to fly from one place to the next. So I don't know that much about HCS, but if HCS focuses on large landscapes only, that I think would be problematic. Of course, for conservation, the larger the better. The larger your forest set-asides, the better it is. But I think ultimately all these forest patches are important, but they need to be managed. And for that, I need managers. And if that, in this case, is in the oil palm industry, I work with the oil palm industry and try to see whether we can manage retain these forest patches and corridors within that landscape of agriculture and forest and people.
Right. Thank you.
Itu
Thank
aja,
you.
Pak.
Yeah. Anybody else want to ask question? Ibu Ina is having question on chat. Ibu Ina want to put it directly to Eric. So far, are there any scientific info or data whether other vegetable oil is considered to be unsustainable even if they are certified? Right. The second question is looking at the problem of biodiversity. For example, more locally, do you think the sustainability certification are better established nationally or agreed internationally?
Repeat that second question, Pak Togar.
Looking at the problem of biodiversity, for example, are more I think locally on biodiversity. Do you think the sustainability certification are better established nationally or agreed international? Yeah, that's the one that Bu Ina put in on the chat. Okay. Anybody
I'm not quite
else?
sure I understand the question, but maybe someone else can answer. I can understand answer the first question. I don't actually know what other oils are certified. There is the
Only palm oil.
well, the Roundtable on Sustainable Soy. Is that what it's called?
Yeah. Yes, RTRS, the Roundtable
Yeah.
on Responsible Soy. I think.
Responsible
And
soy.
I've Googled. There is like certified virgin olive oil and so on. But
Yes.
Yeah, Sucro, the what's it called? Sugarcane.
sugarcane.
Yes,
Yeah.
and you have,
Okay.
but the other ones are more niche markets, if I may. The other ones are more niche markets in sense it's organic, or it would be Rainforest Alliance. I mean, it's more premium market. You're not looking at like the RSPO, ISPO, MSPO, which are really bulk certification or large size certification.
Okay. Yeah. So I don't think there's that many other big certified oils, and the impact of the production of these oils on biodiversity. There is definitely a lot of work done on soy. I think that's pretty well documented. Impacts of deforestation of soy. One that seems to not be touched very much is rapeseed, and I've sort of been looking at. I can't do this. I'm not a remote sensing expert, but I look at deforestation in sort of northern Saskatchewan in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And I see there is a lot of deforestation. If you go to the Global Forest Watch website, the WRI website, I see forests disappearing, and I look at Google Earth and I see yellow plants there. So I think there's rapeseeds going into the northern, the boreal forest. But I look at the Canadian FAO statistics, and Canada has had zero deforestation for the past 20 years. So I don't know. But these are the kind of things that I think require more detailed research. Where are the crops planted? How are they expanding, and where are they expanding into natural areas? I think coconut has been a little bit of work on that, not that much, and mostly local. I think coconut is recognized as a problem crop in Pacific Islands, where sometimes 60% of the island nation is covered in coconut, and of course that would have been natural forest at some stage. And the problem with these small islands is they often have very high endemic species diversity. So it has a big impact on species with small ranges. But again, no one has really studied it at a global level. So that is further work that needs to be done. I didn't ask understand the second question. Ibu Ina. Yeah. The national versus international. Maybe someone else has an answer.
Sorry, Pak Togar, if I may.
Yeah.
Pak Eric, I'm Ina. I'm so sorry that I cannot show the video. The Wi-Fi is not stable enough. Pak Eric, so my question is actually regarding well, this is I do understand when you said scientifically it confirms that palm oil is unsustainable. So if we keep on discussing palm oil only when it comes to vegetable oils, we ourselves discriminating palm oil in that sense. But your presentation is very important to me at the very least. I think everyone agrees with this, that it compares palm oil with other vegetable oils, which makes it undiscriminative, right? And when you said about biodiversity, as for example, you mentioned in your presentation that the problem of the challenge of biodiversity is more local rather than global. Like for example, the animals that are extinct. So if you think about, in comparison with other vegetable oils, when we talk about sustainability, I saw the chat that someone said that stop talking about sustainability because the meaning of sustainability keep changing.
That's Indra.
If we do talk about sustainability and the fact that the problem is more local rather than global, would it be better to have a kind of standards or certification or whatever established nationally or agreed internationally or something I don't know, because it was a bit, like I said, sometimes it gets emotional when we talk about palm oil only rather than talking about vegetable oil in general. That's why I said, would it be better to talk about sustainability nationally, so we can just pick and choose what sustainability standard or certification that we want according to what kind of products that we produce, or we need to have certain international standard or certification that is agreed by everyone.